Ashira shita kneti kirigiriz hestari hahemi iyoin pindiri city. Wiku kirigiriz garocho say. Hello everyone. My name is Isabel Friday. My Lakota name is Bright Shiny Moon Woman. I'm Wichita from the Waco band Kaiwa, Kato, and Uka Oglala Lakota. And today I'll be singing a Lakota Aloha. Wopila Sutiits. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. It sounds like you're having a little bit of audio issues, but thank you so much for opening us in a good way. Thank you to everyone for joining and to our panel for participating and sharing their hearts and their spirits with us today. Antonia, if you could go to the next slide. My name is Tasha Mousseau. I am Wichita, Kiowa, Caddo, also Hunka'augua Lakota. I live on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, but today I'm lucky enough to be calling from my homelands in Oklahoma, calling from Anadarko today. And I am a consultant for the TYRC. Also serve in another capacity for Friends of the Children as the Chief Officer of Advancement and Tribal Relations. All things youth is my heart work, and this particular subject today is very near and dear to me, both on behalf of myself, my daughters, and all of our other relatives who are navigating three worlds. We say in Indian country, we're walking in two worlds. And for those of us that are biracial, there's this added layer to what we experience in life. So I really appreciate everyone joining us today to learn more, to share, and to understand each other better. And with that, I'll turn it over to Glenn to introduce himself. Glenn.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Glenn Beaver. I am Kiowa, Delaware, Caddo, Creek, and Shawnee. I am originally from Carnegie, Oklahoma. I now live in Anadarko, Oklahoma. I am an enrolled member of the Kiowa tribe, and I work for the Kiowa tribe in the capacity of director over our prevention program. Started as the coordinator of events for our suicide prevention program, and been working with, had the pleasure of working with youth and young people for 13 years now. To me, it's very important to be able to share experiences, share lessons learned with our young people so that those of those mistakes and some of those things are not repeated. And to be able to take part in today's learning collaborative gives me is a great honor for me growing up in uh, in this region, uh, experiencing some of the things, being of two races and trying to understand who I was as an individual. I believe it gave me some of the sometimes hard lessons, but also some of the experiences that and wisdom that helped me throughout my life. So I'm looking forward to taking part today and sharing with you all. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. I hope.
Thank you, Glenn. Next slide, Antonia. Next, we will go to Toshka Isaiah Weasel Bear to introduce himself. And it looks like you're on the move, Toshka. Be safe.
Dr. My name is Isaiah Beaver. Of course, the name is Wase Ali Nuz, which means stand on red war paint on Oglala Lakota and Chisangu Lakota. I was raised by my grandparents on a Rosebud reservation. Uh, throughout throughout my time on the Rosebud reservation, I learned like a lot of my cultural history through Sundance ceremony, um, powwows, every cultural event you can think of. Through my black side, the African American side, my father was in the Air Force. That's how I came about here in South Dakota. My mom is a Lakota. Uh, played basketball on the Rosebud Reservation, United Tribes up in North Dakota. A dancer, traditional dancer, father, a mentor to a lot of youth who are biracial here in Rapid City. It's something that I'm really passionate about, and through my experiences, I feel like I can really help biracial kids and just Native kids in general, just because I grew up on res and seeing the hardships that we all go through, regardless of skin tone. So I'm happy to be a part of this conversation today and panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Toshka. Chungshi Kennedy.
Ashirshita Mati Girigiri Sasari Umpaya Hipilin de Ditsiri. Wiku Girigiris Oigu Garochetetse. Hello, how are you all? My name is Kim Desithima Aquaman Kennedy Friday. I'm Wichita from the Waco Band, Kiowa, Caddo, and Hunka Lakota. I'm 17 years old and a senior currently attending Red Cloud High School.
Thanks, Ken. Next slide, Antonia. So we're going to start with a poll question, just because in my conversations with this panel, we talked about that we're starting to see more people that look like us. So wondering from the group, if you have a relative in your immediate family who is biracial, African American, Indigenous, just to kind of see where we're starting from our understanding and connection to this community. All right, we'll give it a couple more seconds here before we close the panel. Or the poll, sorry. All right, Antonia, let's check it out. Awesome, so close to 50-50 here. But yeah, so just kind of wanted to gauge that, because I think, as we try to understand other human beings, if we have a direct connection to that, somehow easier, to humanize and have connection to different points of view, ways of life, experience, and understanding. So thank you for humoring me and kind of giving us a visual of what our connection is to the Indigenous African American community. Next slide. So I really wanted to start us with a foundation of historical context. I know many of us have this understanding, but some do not, and so and you're looking at these photos here, these historical photos, you see that while many of us may not have Indigenous and African American people in our family, it's not a new concept. We had tribes that were slaveholding tribes. We had the freedmen who became a part of those sovereign tribal nations. We have shared traumas, whether that's slavery and removal, stealing of land, genocide, all of those things that we have shared between Indigenous and African American communities. We also have shared resilience. We have strength in our histories and our ancestors and our traditional ways of knowing and being. I think also it's important to recognize that in our traditional Indigenous kinship systems, whether that is, adoption like the Hunka adoption for the Lakota people, or just welcoming folks into our tribe, once they were ours, they were ours. And as Toshka Isaiah said, regardless of skin tone, right? If you're Indian, you're Indian. If you're Kiowa, you're Kiowa. It's not based on how much or how little blood you have. It really is your connection to community and culture. And then we have intermarriage as well, as, some tribes either had slaves, had freed slaves, or took in runaway slaves as a part of their community. We had intermarriage traditionally as well. And we had acceptance. I think that our people were of a heart and a mindset and a spirit, again, that if you're a part of our community, you're a part of our community. And we don't differentiate between this community member or that community member because of their skin color or their hair texture. And I hope that that's something that we're getting back to. And I see that, the whole reason behind this panel at this time is because we're celebrating Black History Month, and it's really refreshing to me to see large national Native organizations acknowledging that, seeing us, highlighting us as Indigenous people. And so I see that as a part of what I'm calling our Indigenous Renaissance, as we reclaim who we are through our languages, through our government systems, through our ceremonies. We're also reclaiming how we define ourselves and how we welcome and accept our people. And so it's, again, very refreshing and very excited about this conversation that we're having and the enthusiasm of our team. We have some teammates here from the TYRC that are participating as well. And so this learning and openness to understanding is very refreshing. So thank you all for that. And just kind of wanted to set that foundation and put these little nuggets in the back of your mind to think about or explore more if you're interested in the historical context and connections between African American and Indigenous folks. Next slide, Antonio. So the other foundational piece, which even in this panel and conversation, you're going to hear me say Indigenous, Native American, African American, Black, you're going to hear all of the things, but what is in a name? And so some people, when I was growing up, people are saying I'm mixed, right? And then we're biracial, we're Blendian, we're Black Indian, Afro-Indigenous. There are tribal specific terms for African American people and mixed race people. And so what I wanted to start out with was, what resonates with this panel as like, how do you identify, do any of these terminologies resonate with you? Or are there any you're like, yeah, no, that I'm good on that. So let's actually start with Kennedy. As a young person, how do you identify in the context of any of these words or something else?
I identify as being probably mixed or biracial. Usually I just say mixed, that my mom's both Black and Native and that my dad is Black. I don't think I like have a connection with Afro-Indigenous. That's like, it like seems hardcore to me. So just saying I'm mixed is kind of just on the surface of what like I'm comfortable with, and like that's easier to explain. to others my age at least. I think if I said I was Afro-Indigenous to kids my age, they'd be like, what? But when you say you're mixed, they're like, oh, yeah. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. And then Glenn, how about yourself?
Looking at these terms and especially, hearing the terminology of today, growing up, I don't remember ever using anything like biracial or anything on here. You know, a lot of times, being here in the southwest part of Oklahoma and then southwest part of the United States, I never really got mistaken for either. No one ever asked whether I was Native or even Black. It was mostly people thought I was Hispanic, you know. So then when I'd have to explain, I always use the term, half, like I'm half, and especially back then, it seemed like everybody used the term half breed, So uh, for me, nowadays I would say, mostly mixed or if I'm trying to be politically correct or anything, mixed or biracial for me.
Thanks, Glenn. I think that's a really good point, and we could probably have had a question about that. All the variety of things that you've been mistaken for, right? I've been Puerto Rican, Dominican, Hawaiian, all sorts of things other than what I am. And so that's also an interesting lived experience where people are taking the time to try to identify what you are. And I don't think that's an experience a lot of folks have. Isaiah.
For me, I was mostly like, I think being called mixed or like, my grandma would tell me I was Blackota, just putting a B in front of the Lakota. So that was something that my grandma kind of gave me and just told me to, just be prideful in who I am. And, I have cousins who are different tribes. They're also mixed, and I get mistaken for Puerto Rican, everything Filipino. When I lived in Seattle, Filipino was the biggest thing that I've always heard. And once I tell people I'm Native, they're just so mind blown. And I think it's just a blessing, just to be Native and Black. It's two strong cultures. So mixed for me was what I identified with the most.
Thank you. I think for myself, also mixed. I would kind of, to Glenn's point, if people called me a half breed, I kind of bristled at that though in my age group because that, to me that denotes like livestock, but it's very common in Oklahoma, and was more when I was growing up. All of the, I would say biracial. I agree with you, Kennedy. Afro-Indigenous just hits me a little differently and it doesn't resonate with my spirit in that way. And I think those tribal specific terms, I think there's a point to be made of how they're said, right? Because they can be said with an edge on the tongue that is meant to demean you, or they can just be said as a descriptor. And it's who's saying it and how they're saying it as to whether or not that will resonate with me. But yeah, the Black Indian and the Blue Indian, that doesn't. And I think part of the experience that I have is just really being raised in my culture and spirituality. And so don't, I'm an Indigenous woman and I'm also Black, right? And I think cultural identity for me is Indigenous. And so to put Afro in front of that, it kind of negates some of how I was raised and who my foundation is. And so I think that's kind of the nuance. But I wanted to talk about that because we also talk about that when we're dealing with non-natives. Do you want to be Indigenous? Do you want to be Native? Do you want to be in, your specific tribal name? And so I think it's important because people want to know how to accurately and respectfully address you. And so I think that's an important conversation to have. So thank you all for sharing. Next slide. So these next group of slides, we are going to share our individual stories. We won't go through, I was born on a mountaintop, but we're going to definitely share with you kind of our overarching themes of our lived experience, because we come from different generations. Glenn is just a little bit older than I am. And then Isaiah's younger than me and Kennedy's younger than him. So I really wanted us to have that spectrum because we've all had different experiences because times change and people's viewpoints change and things become more normalized. And so I'll go ahead and leave it to you, Glenn, to start telling your story. And if you want me to lean in with any of those questions, I know there's a lot we're trying to cover. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. So, growing up and I can remember from, when I was very young, I was different. I felt different. I knew I looked different. Uh, if you see the second picture, that's my mom and my brother. And obviously, my brother and I had different dads. Uh, and the thing was, I think for me is my dad, my biological dad, he left my mom very early. Um, so growing up, I didn't. All I knew was that I was Kiowa, even though I knew that I was black. Um, but I didn't have any cultural connection or any heritage, connection to my black side. So growing up, I was just Kiowa, but I knew I was different. And the first time I remember getting treated differently, uh, I was at a powwow. I was at a powwow, and I was outside running around with some of the other kids, and I remember, you know, getting called the N word for the first time, and it was an older an older kid, just probably just a little older than me, and getting called and I didn't understand it at that time. I didn't understand what that meant. I didn't understand what I was being called. And I remember going back and talking to my mom and sharing that with her. You know, she assured me, who I was. She began to explain where I came from, you know, uh, and I remember mom telling me, giving me more insight and background of who I was, how I came to be, and it was at that time it was a part of me that I didn't have the identity of that. Like I said, as far as I knew and as far as I was being treated, I was Indian, I was Kiowa, and that was that. As I got older, as I became a little more aware uh, as a teenager, uh, part of what kind of began to shape me, especially as an individual, and especially as having an identity with both sides of who I was. Uh, it, it was athletics. Athletics really, I think, helped me shape my identity of connecting with the black side of who I was. I was very athletic. I was, could perform and at a high level. And I think that's when people begin to recognize, you know, how different, not different, but, a lot of times not really asking. I think people didn't know that or didn't approach me in that way. But whenever I got a little older and people began to um, recognize, through my athletic ability, and sometimes that was an excuse. Well, you're better because you're half black, or you're faster because you're half black, or you wouldn't be this talented, or you wouldn't have this ability if you weren't, you know. But the good thing about it was, uh, as far as family, I never got treated differently. Uh, experienced, I had a very close relationship with my mom. Uh, my mom, she was a single mother. She raised me and my brother as, we never used the term half brothers. You know, we were brothers, and it was never used that. So that helped me not to feel any different as well. Also, my brother's dad, uh, whenever he and my mom got married, he took full responsibility. He said, "That's my son. and I'm going to raise him as my son. Unfortunately, we lost him when I was about 6, and so it was just us. We were alone. Uh, but like I said, my family, my mom's side of the family never treated me any different. Um, I remember, on the in the third picture, you see me with my little afro there, and I remember feeling, uh, I wanted straight hair. I wanted straight, long, straight black hair. I wanted to have a lot of my friends, when we were younger, had braids, and I wanted that. I wanted to have that, and it was not in the cards. I was I had this curly hair, and that's the way it was going to be, and I had to come to terms with that. It took me a while. It took me a while to accept the fact that because I didn't like my hair. It was one of like the the feature of mine that I could not hide behind. And I remember all of my grandmas would tell me how much they loved my hair. And I think, obviously, they were getting perms and trying to have curly hair and whatnot, and they were like, "Oh, I love your hair. I wish I had your hair." And I didn't understand that. And it took me a while. It took me a while before I really began to grow into and enjoy having curly hair. And when I say a while, I would say, into my late 20s, really before I appreciated having curls. If you look at the very first picture, uh, on the right side of me is my brother from my mom, and on the left side of me is my brother from my dad. First time I met my dad, I was 23. Very first time I met him. At that time, I was a father myself, and really I fully identified as Native American, as Kiowa, and I didn't have any animosity, but I felt like okay, it's nice to meet you, but I have a life, and we can stay connected, but this is my life. And fast forward, years passed. Mom passes away, and my oldest son was graduating high school. He said he wanted to meet his grandpa. He hadn't seen him since he was 3. So we reconnected, and that's when I met my siblings from my dad's side. And the awesome part about this experience was nobody. Whenever I met my dad's side of the family, it was a meeting with open arms. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the movie Antoine Fisher, but when he meets his family at the very end of the movie that he didn't know, and how they just greeted him and loved on him, like they'd known him their whole life, like he'd known them their whole life. That's how it was when I met my dad's family. Uh, my papa, my granny, just they just were just ecstatic to meet me, and we got to have a good relationship. My brother and I have a great relationship. My sister, my dad, and my stepmom, we all have a great relationship as well. And it's and he came. My brother is awesome because he wants to experience everything Native American, everything Kiowa. So you see that we're at a powwow. He came all the way. He lives in Tulsa. He came all the way from Tulsa to Carnegie for our Fourth of July celebration, and came and experienced it. He loves fry bread. I mean, he's always asking for fry bread, and wanted my wife to cook Indian tacos for him. But it really helped me uh, to not say that never did recognize my African American, my black side, but it really helped me get a connection, a close connection, and embrace embrace it more, that I was a product of two different worlds, and here I am. Uh, all my sons, on the very last picture are my youngest boys. They're 6 and 3. They got the curls, but they both have long braids now, and but just all my boys. I think one of the thing is, like I said, growing up in this part of and being absent away from my black side of my family, I remember my second son. He was riding in a car with my wife, and uh, he mentioned something about being black, but he didn't understand what that meant. And my wife told him, she said, "Well, son, you're black," and he didn't really know. Like he knew, but he didn't know, and it was like almost like an eye opener to him. And he looked at my wife and he goes, "I'm black," and she was like, "Yeah, like your dad is. Wouldn't that make sense that you are?" And it was like, "Oh, okay." So it, but I think one of the cool things about it is that we growing up outside of a few instances where there was some discrimination, because I was mixed. People looked down on me. Growing up in a small community, Carnegie, there was times where I was looked at differently because not because I was native, but also because I was black. There wasn't very many. There was only one, maybe two black families in Carnegie. So it was an experience, feeling different. Uh, but I've raised my kids to know their the black side of their family. I don't obviously my younger boys don't really understand the concept of no. We raised them very very Kiowa, trying to be native. They don't really fully understand that yet. My sons do. My sons know, and I think for us or for our family, I think because we are uh, kind of not detached, but just we don't live close to my dad. It it's kind of sometimes hard to really grasp that part of you. Being half black, it's kind of hard really having that connection because we're our family lives 100 200 miles away, so that's where we're going to get that, that's where we're going to feel that, that's where we're going to be exposed to our black heritage. And it's a little hard when you don't have that closeness, I think, for us. But for me, my story uh early on felt isolated, felt different, uh, had feelings of feeling different, and at times wondered why I was different. As I got older, becoming more connected to being mixed because of athletics, and then later in life having children of my own, and then meeting my dad and my dad's side of the family, fully coming full circle and really having a full acceptance and connection of both sides. There's both benefits of. I would say I had the best of both worlds. So that's kind of the way I feel.
I love that. I would agree with that completely. It is the best of both worlds. I think you don't realize it so much when you're younger and things are hard, but as you get older, you come to really fully appreciate what that is. I think we'll go to the next slide, but Glenn, there is a longer question for you in the chat. So I don't know if you want to answer it in the chat
Okay.
Directly.
Okay.
Toshka, Isaiah.
Okay, so I'll just start off with the trying to get to the slide here. Sorry, so can't really see the slide on this. So here it is. Okay, so I'll just start with the left picture on the left. That's me when I was thinking about 5 years old. I lived in Seattle, Washington at the time. I was going to Daybreak Star. It was a cultural school. Um, for me, I didn't really get the idea of being different until I moved to South Dakota, uh, to the Rosebud Reservation, and that's kind of when I experienced my first taste of racism against like just being mixed. I had a kid that called me, just said I was different, and I remember it hurt my feelings being young. So I had asked my grandparents, why do I look different? So like that's when my like understanding I was different from what everybody else on the reservation kind of started. I think I was about a second, third grader at that time. what helped me build a lot of friends on the reservation was just playing basketball. Like I was always like Glenn said, like I was faster. Like that's what they'd always say, you know, you're black, so you're supposed to be faster. And it was kind of like it's just like a stereotype that I was always given. Um, I danced in powwows. I'm not trying to boast about myself, but I was really good. Uh, I used to win all the time, you know, like Denver March, Gathering Nations. I went down to Red Earth, Oklahoma, won that when they had it in Oklahoma City. My grandpa had taught me a lot of old songs. So like I was really like fortunate to have my grandpa, and he's also mixed black and native. So like he went through a lot of the hardships. So if I think just having him as my mentor and being black and native himself, you know, that really helped me. Like it gave me an advantage to what he went through at an older time. You know, he was born in the 50s and he went through it when people were going through segregation, you know, people, you know, AIM was going on here in Black Hills. You know, it was a war going on basically here, and he was able to navigate through that. And so just having him in my corner really helped me through my life and my childhood. And going to powwows, he just told me, you know, dance with your heart. You know, it doesn't matter the color of your skin. It's how you move. It's, you know, how you hear the drum, you know, who you are as a Lakota person is what he'd always told me. So it's just like, just having my grandpa, you know, that's something that really helped me a lot in my life. Like I said, just playing basketball, the friends I made through basketball, my athletic ability, you know, people started to really gravitate towards me as far as this guy he's different looking, but he's doing he's dancing better than some of the Lakota boys, like he's out here in the power circuit. Like I'd had families getting mad, like he's not supposed to be out there, this and that, and it was just like keeping my level of focus from that being that young. It carried into my adulthood. I never really had a connection with my father. He was in the Air Force and he was here in South Dakota at one point and he left. um, he reached out to me, and by that point I had my own kids. It just wasn't really a connection for me, and to this day I don't really have a connection to him. I'd say my grandfather has been my father. I'm blessed. Honestly, I'm blessed. I'm glad I ended up where I was at out in the res. Like it taught me so much humility, like how to be humble. I was able to, like I said, go to sun dances from a young age, Humbletya, go to Bear Butte, these sacred places we have here in the Black Hills. Like it was something that, I look back on it now and it's like these hardships I went through were actually a blessing to really like, I can give that to my son because he's gonna grow up in the same footsteps I did, Black and Native. And it's just like, from a white perspective here, I get looked at differently because, they don't know if I'm Black, they don't know if I'm Native, they don't know I'm a person of color at the end of the day here in Rapid City. So I think just remembering that I have to be focused and, I'm different for a reason. That was always kind of like my motive to just continue to be myself. I'm different for a reason. So I think for me, just giving my knowledge back to my son and just to the youth I work with here, it's just like it's honestly a blessing. And let me go through these pictures that I have here. So this is with Friends of the Children, the one in the middle. This is the mentorship group that I'm doing here in Rapid City. Uh, it's I'm working with a student here now. He's also mixed Black and Native, and his father was murdered here in Rapid City like 3 years ago. And he was a really good athlete. He was, like I said, Black and Native. He could jump out of the gym. He just crazy good athlete. And his son is actually somebody I'm mentoring now. And just to be able to kind of share my life experience and how I've navigated through this journey of being different, um, it's really rewarding. Like it makes me happy that I'm able to help my friend who's gone. He was, like I said, he was one of the few Black Native friends that I had out here. So just to be able to help him through Friends of the Children, the work that I'm doing, like it really makes my life feel like it's full circle. Like my life has meaning, and I'm supposed to be doing what I'm doing for a reason to align paths with him. The picture on the right is me breaking somebody's ankles. I don't know if you see him back there, but yeah, I was in high school, St. Francis. As I said, my athletic ability was always what set me different, being able to dance. So it's just a little bit
Yeah, I
of,
shared your dancing photo in the chat. It didn't make it on the slide, but so the group can see that photo in the chat.
yeah, so it's just like staying focused through sports and through dancing and, just staying close to my grandparents. That's what really helped me. I had a few friends that were my teammates and they understood everything I went through. Like I remember one time we were in a basketball game and the coach was like saying racial stuff to our whole team, but I feel like it hit me a little harder because that's something that I went through my whole life. Um, Here in South Dakota, they compare it to like being Alabama, Mississippi sometimes just because of the conservatism and just the white national mentality that's here. So it's just really learning to, embrace who you are, no matter if you're Lakota, no matter if you're Black, just being strong and confident in who you are. I think that's the main key of what I've learned here. Thank you.
Thank you, Toshka. So we'll go to the next slide. Chungshi Kennedy.
So yeah, it makes my heart happy to hear you guys' stories and like knowing that it kind of like it gets better as you get older and like it's comforting to know that other people have experienced the same things I have. Like I'm only a teenager. I haven't been Black and Native as long as you guys have, but like we share similar experiences, and so like I think my whole life my mom has taught me that like I'm native and like I'm Black but I'm native culturally. I'm native. I do everything native, right? And I didn't even know I was Black till I was like 5. I swear to everybody that I was just native and I didn't even know I was Black, but even though my dad's very Black, but like I just like I had grown up that way. Everybody around me treated me like I was native. My grandma did, my mom did, my dad did, everybody around me did. And so like that's all I knew, and so like that's who I was. And so like as I got older, like I experienced racism for the first time in 6th grade. I had accidentally stepped on a kid's lunchbox and he called me the N-word with the hard R just for stepping on his lunchbox. And so like that was the first time like something really big had happened to me. And so it was like, oh wow, it's like other people don't see me as native. Like on the outside I am just Black to people. Like they don't know that I go to Senett's, that I go to NEPI with my family, that I pray every day, right? They didn't know that. All they saw was that I was a Black girl on the outside. And so like that kind of hurt because it was like I practice my native ways like all the time year round. I pray every day, right? But I'm only being seen as a Black girl. And so it wasn't like I didn't want to just be seen as a Black girl, but I wanted people to acknowledge my native side. And so like even as I grew up, it was just like I could never be Black enough for Black people, but I could never be native enough for native people, even people, some of my cousins in my life, right? Like they didn't see me as native enough as they were. Even if I was more, if I was less, like I was just as native as you are, but they couldn't acknowledge the fact that I was native. And like even compared to my sister is lighter than I am. She's really, really long curly hair. And like I could never achieve that. And so personally, I didn't feel native enough. And I kind of felt like like an outsider. Even my mom's awesome. She's the best Black person and the best native person I know. And like I see her as a native person and like she understands native things. And so I was like, even she's seen as like a native person. And so like that was a struggle that I've struggled with. Even kind of currently, I'm still thinking about it, but it was just like I'm never enough for either side. But I think in the grand scheme of things, I think about like the people who love me in my life and who care about me in my life see both sides of me. My mom sees both sides of me. My dad sees both sides of me. My grandparents would see both sides of me. And it was like they know who I am on the inside and out, right? And so I was really thankful for all the people in my life who showed me, the way of being biracial. My mom experienced all the same things I have. So she kind of helped me on my path in life to figure out through tough situations with people who don't know how to deal with mixed people. And so in my pictures, there's a lot of just me, but my great grandma's the one in the middle under the baby picture. And um, I only had her in my life till I was 5, but like she made me feel so wanted and welcome as just a brown baby. And she just loved me so much and she showed me that it was okay to just be both and she didn't treat me differently or anything. She just saw me as her baby girl. And even my papa Toby sees me that way. That's him in the picture with me and my sister. They never treated me any kind of way, any bad way. They treated me as who I was and who I acted like. And it was just like, it was very comforting. And like, even now in high school, when I moved to the reservation, I think I was kind of othered because I am brown. I think I always say when we play basketball games, like the refs are racist, like you said, Isaiah, but I'm a different type of brown. So it's worse for me. And so I'm thankful to have a coach who's also brown and he relates to it, what it's like to be black and like experience racism in Rapid City. Cause like even walking around Ross, I get looked at like I'm an alien because there's like three other black people in Rapid. And so like that feeling that feeling of just like, being othered is a weird feeling, but I have comfort here. My coach is black. I have teammates that are black. Last year, my best friend that played with me on my basketball team was black. Like they understand me and we can like joke about it and talk about it and like I think communicate experiences that are similar to one another and provide a positive space where it's like you understand me and I understand you. And so I'm excited to see what the rest of my biracial life will be like, and the experiences I will experience, but I'm hoping for a positive one. And I'm so thankful for everybody, all the panelists and my mom, for everything you guys' stories are like very helpful to me, and I'm going to take them on with me in my life.
Thank you so much for sharing, Chungshi. I think, you feeling this validation of hearing, like you've heard my story. Yes, I'm your mom, and, but to hear other stories, I think that's part of what this group of people on this webinar are wanting to know. Like, how can we support youth? And maybe it's just exposing them to other people's stories, right? And making them know that they're not alone in this, beyond just being good relatives and accepting. And because I'm Kennedy's mom, I'm also going to say, both Kennedy and Isabella, they have more cultural knowledge than I had at their age than a lot of adults have in their pinky. They are so culturally grounded and knowledgeable. They, can sing songs in 3 different languages. They can speak in 4 different languages. They really are students of their culture because I raised them to be that way. And I also, that's where I come from, and I'll talk about that in my slide. But I think we have to be more. We have to know more. We have to be able to validate who we are in a way that others don't. You can just walk around and look Indian and be Indian, and everybody's okay with that. But whenever you are a different kind of brown, as Kennedy said, sometimes you have to prove yourself. Should you have to? No. But people need to know, because I've had folks say, oh, I knew you were Indian, but I didn't know you were Indian, right? Like, because we're grounded in our culture. And so it's a very interesting lived experience, but was very intentional with my children in raising them to be grounded in culture. And I think it's important that for those of us that work with youth to really lean in and teach culture to all of our children, but specifically our children that are going to experience that extra layer of racism, discrimination, and being othered. So we can go to the next slide. And I apologize, my voice is a little shaky. I'm kind of cold. You would think I would be colder in South Dakota, but here I am in Oklahoma freezing. So, I guess the overarching theme of my biracial life is really a journey of self-understanding, love, and acceptance. And really confidence in who I am. I think the older that I get, I was born in the 80s in Oklahoma City to teenage parents. My grandmother raised me, my Native American grandmother, who's in those pictures, most impactful person in my life. She was a Native American rights activist. Got to go around with her and watch her, fight on behalf of our people and really teach me what it was to be an Indian woman, in all the ways, because she was also very intentional in teaching me our cultural ways, taking me to ceremony and making sure I knew exactly who I was. She always instilled in me this pride of who I am. When I was little, I like to tell this story, in the 80s, all the books didn't have brown people in them. So before she would give me a book, she would color every character brown and make their hair black, so that I would see myself in literature. She always told me that the creator made me just how I was supposed to be and to be proud of both sides of who I am. she would make sure to expose me to not only these Indigenous rights leaders, but also these African American rights leaders, and making sure I go to MLK events and meet folks here in Oklahoma like Clara Looper, and really exposing me to that, because like Glenn and Isaiah, I didn't have my dad in my life. So there is this level of disconnect from your African American culture, and especially when you're very much being engulfed in your Indigenous way of life. So it wasn't until middle school, I was even older than Kennedy, where I didn't realize I didn't look exactly like my grandma. Like, I thought I'm Native, I look like my grandma. And when I got to seventh grade, an African American girl basically told me, like, you are not Native American, you're Black. And she was really like telling me who I was, and I was like, wait, hold up, what? And not, again, not that I didn't know that I was Black, but I was just so into our culture and our life ways and our community that I thought I looked like my grandma, which I did not. And so that was a rough time. I would say middle school through high school, um, African American women were very, very mean to me. I mean, pulling hair, saying ugly things to me. I have the voice that I have, calling me a white girl, because again, like Kennedy, I wasn't Black enough. And I will say my Indigenous community during that time was very accepting of me, at least in my peers. But I've had experiences with elders questioning my right to be places, my validity as an Indigenous human being. And those are hurtful. And I think that's something that I want to share with this group. I've experienced a variety of types of racism, but the most painful and heart-wrenching racism I've ever experienced is from Native people, because that's who I am. And it hurts in a different way when your people are unaccepting of you and hurtful. And so, whether that's casually using the N word with a hard or a soft R, that is kind of making you invisible and as if you don't matter. And sometimes our relatives try to cloak that, and I don't see color, or I just see you as Native. That's fine and great. But when you do that, you're cutting into a piece of who I am, and you're not acknowledging this whole other side of my being. And so I think that's, super important takeaway as we work with young people in community, and as we mentor people along our paths, that we acknowledge who they are in their entirety. So as I was saying, my experiences with African American women, I never had a positive experience with African American women until I was an undergrad in college, and I joined an African American sorority and gained sisters that way. I think people were a lot more mature at that point, and really just filled my heart to have that acceptance on that side as well. But my life has been very intentional, and the older I get, the more intentional I am about raising our voices and amplifying this. What you're seeing on the screen in these slides, this is also Indian country. These are also our amazing athletes, our scholars, our, change makers, our medicine people. That is also a part of who we are. And I think when I was younger, it was more difficult for me to navigate, because I felt in some spaces that I had to make that part of me smaller, because it was already blaringly obvious. I don't know what people see when they look at me at this point. Maybe they see an African American woman with fabulous earrings and a ribbon skirt. I don't know, but I know who I am, and I'm unapologetic about that to anyone. And I think that's what we do as we empower young people. And I've tried to empower both of my daughters, is to just really fully own who you are. And I want to encourage young people to also explore that other side of who they are. Don't make that smaller. If we don't have one of our parents in our life who represent that piece of who we are, how do we find out? How do we as Native people help expose them to that other side of them, so they feel like an accepted whole person? And I think events like this are awesome. I think we can do that at the local level for our tribal youth programs and within our sovereign tribal nations. I was looking on social media, and I saw that Chief Hoskin of the Cherokee Nation, which has acknowledged their freedmen, um, did a Black History Month event, acknowledging the Tulsa race riots in Greenwood Village in Tulsa. And I think those are those steps that let all Indigenous people along the broad spectrum be seen. And so super happy and blessed and proud to be exactly who I am, to be born into the family that I am, to be the shade of brown that I am, and to raise children who are hopefully on that same journey to fully come into their own and be unapologetically Indigenous. And so I don't know if that tells all of my stories and all of my hardships, but and resilience. But I think we can stop there and kind of go on to the questions. We'll have some direct questions, but also want to take questions from those of us in the audience. You can put those in the chat. So we'll start with Isaiah on this first question while we wait for questions from the audience. But during the time when you were born or grew up, what was kind of the communal perception of being biracial?
The perception I got, I felt like it was honestly people just didn't know. Like there was me and like maybe one other kid that was biracial on the res. So, and he was a good athlete. So like I kind of had to follow his footsteps. Um, he was like my older brother, distant relative. The perception I got is, Black people are thugs. I had a school teacher tell me that, most Black people are thugs, and just wasn't a good perception of, the idea of Black people on the res, especially being near a border town, is like it was more like they kind of looked down upon me. Like I said, it wasn't until I started dancing and started playing sports where they changed their perspective and perception of who I was. But like the common perspective was just what is portrayed on TV. Black people are thugs. Black people do this. For me, it was just like just sticking to myself and just being comfortable with who I was, and just changing that narrative that they already had in their head, not for them, but just for myself, just being confident within myself. So that was kind of the perception that I was given on the res. Do I go through with all the questions or just stop there?
No, that one. I'm just gonna pop around. Kennedy, how do you think tribal youth programs or juvenile healing to wellness court staff could support youth who share your identity?
I think doing stuff like this, like showing people who are just like me or have lived the life that I'm about to live, right? Who can share their stories and their experiences about how to deal with all of the issues and I think hardships that come with being biracial, and having somebody to look up to who's like, you could see they're on the good road, who's doing good things and good work for Native and for maybe Black people as well, and like show that you can be in touch with both sides and still be welcomed and loved in any community.
Thank you. Glenn, what is or was the greatest challenge of walking in three worlds?
I think for me, the greatest challenge actually came internally. There was times, you know, that I felt, isolated, but it was an internal. It wasn't like I was being isolated from the outside. I trying to, like I said, wonder why was my dad wasn't there, and what was it about me? Um, and being able to, like I said, just come to terms that I was different, and and that's okay. It's okay to be different. That's one of the things that I get to talk to young people now, and when I do, and I get opportunity, I say it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to be different. It's okay to, that's what makes us great. That's some of the greatest things about us individually. So I think the greatest challenge for me was, just learning to accept that, I was different from everybody else, and that's okay. especially learning to accept my curly hair.
Yeah, I know. My grandma used to tell me, "Do you know people pay good money to have hair as curly as yours?" And she really did a good job of making me love my curly hair. But I went through a phase where I tried to straighten it too. So there's that. I'm gonna answer, who was your greatest protector and advocate? And for me, that was my grandmother. She was a fierce warrior woman, and she wouldn't let anybody say anything to me. And she even said, she said, "I am your protector." And I have very much tried to mimic that for my children. And when Kennedy told you about her experience, being called the N word, I felt the pain of that word before, but I never imagined what it felt like to have someone say it to your baby. And that school and that family got all 5'7" of me because that cannot stand. And learned advocacy for my grandmother, and she would do it anywhere from that formal system, working through that process to, had an elder woman talk ugly to me at a powwow. And she's like, "I'm going over there right now." And, I actually discouraged her. I said, "Mom, it's okay." I said, "She doesn't know it's okay." And about 4 years later, that old lady who was being mean to me because I was mixed had a mixed granddaughter who became the love of her life. And so I think that, that just shows, when we have this unique experience in our families, it changes us. It changes the way we see things. That was her baby. And I don't think I needed to tell her, or my grandmother needed to tell her how much she hurt me, because when she looked at that baby, I know she knew, you know, that those ugly words and ugly things that she said to me, her baby was going to have to face that, and I know she didn't want that for her. So very, very interesting lived experience to have someone who is just my fiercest protector and advocate, but all of our children don't have that. And so as you are a tribal youth program leader or juvenile healing to wellness court, really stepping in. Isaiah is a paid professional mentor for Friends of the Children, leaning into those spaces where they don't have protection. A lot of times in a variety of work that I do, I talk about the Lakota teaching of the buffalo circle. When our children are in danger, or when the herd is in danger, they put the calves in the middle. And so that's what we want to do with our children. What part of this buffalo circle are we being for our Indigenous and African American young people as they struggle if their families can't or won't step in for them? So I think advocacy is key. I'll go back to Isaiah. Kennedy, I don't think I'm going to ask you this question, but I can if you want. But I'll ask this of the group, but we'll start with Isaiah. What advice would you give your younger self about navigating the life experience of a biracial youth and tribal community?
Advice I give my younger self is just not to internalize things. People say things out of jealousy. Because nowadays I see Black natives are becoming a trend. A lot of my friends, they're having kids with you know it's just we're becoming more of a trend. And I think Kyrie Irving is a good example of that. There's people who are doing big things that are Black and native, and it's just like everywhere I turn nowadays, like you said, you're the girl that was the lady that was calling you names, she ended up having a granddaughter who was Black and native. It's like it comes full circle. It's just like for me, it's like people have to learn to educate themselves and really realize, we're more similar than we are different to Native people. We've gone through oppression from either side. We know who the common denominator is. We know where the oppression comes from. That's not to say treat Washichu people or white people differently. It's just we know where the oppression has come from. And so it's like, a good example is George Floyd. Whenever George Floyd was killed, AIM was there. When Standing Rock was going on, Farrakhan showed up. It's like we support each other. So it's just like having that in the back of my mind from a younger age. I think that would have really helped me through my adolescence. It wasn't until I got older, we're really connected as Black and Native people. from both sides, we have a lot of similarities, and just being able to help others, and educate others to not feel that type of jealousy, or whatever their motive is, or whatever their feeling is, to people of color, or just Native people, Black people, mixed kids that are on the res. It's just keep an open mind, keep an open heart. Uh, People are mixed, and they're put in families, they're put in positions for a reason, and it's just allowing those youth and those children to thrive in who they are. I think that goes further than any racial comment, or anything negative that you have to say about a person's hair texture, skin tone, because we're all unique in our own way. And it's just being able to bring out those strengths, and being able to help our people as from a tribal perspective, and just allowing kids to be themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn, what advice would you give your younger self?
For me, I think if I could talk to myself when I was younger, kind of like what Isaiah said, is to really share. I said I internalized a lot of what I felt, some loneliness as I got a little older and was in my teen years, some depression, just because not really fully understanding who I was. So I would, obviously just, open up more. I had wonderful mom, uh, wonderful grandparents who loved me. All my aunts. My mom had seven sisters. All my aunts were my moms too. So I had a large family, and really nobody really, like I said, from internally family wise, nobody treated me different. And so, I would go back and tell myself, when you're feeling down, when you're feeling like you're different, and you're isolating yourself, don't do that. Talk about it, open up, and include yourself. Don't exclude yourself, but include yourself. And I kind of embraced and adopted, the loner status, like, oh, that's me, that's who I am, and it don't have to be that way. It didn't have to be that way. So, and I think because I did those things when I was younger, it kind of continued on into my adult life when I felt, I had tough situations and challenges, how I handled those things the same way. So I really encourage myself to open up more and communicate a lot better.
Thank you, Glenn. I think the advice I would give my younger self is to use your voice and stand up for yourself. Like I said, I had a grandma who was my greatest protector. So part of that was like, I didn't have to stand up for myself. My grandma's got this, right? And it wasn't until high school until I really started not taking crap for anybody, for lack of a better, a more eloquent term, right? And so really standing up to both, Native and African American folks who would come for me, and really let them know who I am and that they don't get to define me. They also don't get to erase me. And so I wish I had come to that a lot sooner. I'll say Kennedy does really great about that, and I'm proud of her, because we visit a lot about a variety of things, and she will tell her friend group, I am not the one. You don't get to say the N-word around me. Like, that may fly with other people, but you don't get to do that. And she does a lot of educating, and that can be taxing for all of us, but it's needed. And so I wish I had my voice a little earlier in life, and that's what I tell my younger self. We have a question. Curious to know what type of programs, services, collaborations available that foster synergy between Afro-Native communities. And have you seen the impact of these connections? I'll leave that to anyone, but I can start us off from the work that I do. I see a lot of potential for collaborations. I don't know that we have tapped into the power that will be once we fully, bring those to fruition. As far as collaborations, it's a very delicate balance, I think, Indigenous identity just generally, because we also have this experience of everybody saying, my great grandma was a Cherokee princess, right? So, like, how are we weighing out, like, okay, you're mixed, and then okay, your grandma was a Cherokee princess. Like, so this identity piece is so all over the place. Or I heard, or my hair is a this this curl pattern, so I know that my great great grandma. So there's so much navigating to do it in a respectful, thoughtful, and intentional way. And I just don't know that we, as both communities or either community, have fully acknowledged that. But I think we are on a journey, and people are trying with events like this, with collaborations between different organizations, to support one another. And so I'll kind of stop there to see if Glenn, Isaiah, or Kennedy can think of any collaborations that you know of or would like to see.
I don't necessarily see any collaborations either. I've been working in suicide prevention, for over a decade now, but I have uh, gone to conferences and attended different sessions where those from the African American Black community talk about some of the things that they're doing to enhance their youth and their community. And uh, it's not contrary to what some people may think or believe, it's not dissimilar from the experiences that we're seeing. There's some of the same challenges that are being faced. I attended a session for a youth program for the city of Baltimore, and it was really just information on how youth programs can be brought up from the ground up, and how to. And what I experienced, what I seen was the fact that they are really integrated in some of the same, using some of the same um, I would say ways of reaching out to their young people. Uh, and I think the biggest thing that our communities could do, what I see the African American community doing, what we're doing here is acknowledging the fact that it's family, that family connectedness, having family centered, awareness, outreach, intentions of, you know, that's where we're going to get our biggest cheerleaders. That's where we're going to get our biggest support is from our family. And as family members, really encouraging our young people in that way. And so, I don't see collaboration, from either communities working together, other than in the communities, right? Like your community, if your community is integrated, like here in Anadarko, our community, we're not. Yeah, technically it is a reservation, but we're not, segregated in that way. We have, here in the community of Anadarko, we have Black, we have white, obviously Native, Hispanic. Now we have some Asian and Middle Eastern, in our community now. So, it's a very diverse community. So, learning how to work together in those aspects, I think everybody's working toward the same thing. And if we can do it from a standpoint of how everybody else is doing it, we're all kind of doing it the same way.
Thank you, Glenn. Kennedy?
I feel like creating like resources and spaces where mixed youth from all different walks of life can get together and like either hold like a conference for them like with Unity, and so it like brings them together, and then it kind of shows, it's kind of like how this is, it'll show older people like what youth feel like from all places from the earth, from across America. And like if we could just have a conference of like us talking about our experiences and stuff, I feel like that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I could see how that would increase visibility. And even within like you said at Unity for specific like sessions or whatever, that would highlight this for youth like us, but also all Indigenous youth so they can understand. Let's go to the next question. Kennedy, you're probably left out of this one, sorry. But as parents of multicultural children, what can we do to be better, to be better parents to them? Isaiah, did you want to start?
For me, I have a daughter and a son, both mixed, Black and Native, or Creole, we would say, Creole. But I think just being able to educate them both on both cultures, as far as like what I've learned from my Lakota side and what I know from my black side, and just uh using great references like Martin Luther King, just people who are doing good things on both sides, it could be Sitting Bull, like I said, Martin Luther King, just realizing that we come from strong backgrounds and just instilling that in them from an early age. I feel like that really helps mold them into being strong people and just having that foundation. So I think for me, just using what I was taught through my grandpa through just like cultural songs, dance, and then just the black side of it. Um, my dad telling me, the history of slavery, Underground Railroad, how my family had gone from Georgia to New Jersey to get away from slavery, just things like that, I think that really helps create a better sense of their identity going forward and into their adolescence and adulthood.
Thank you, Toshka. Um, for me, I think it's just the intentionality, kind of what Isaiah is talking about being very intentional of representing the multi faceted uh, parts of who we all are, and particularly children. Last year for Black History Month, I wrote a blog, and it's on the TYRC website, and it is called Warriors and Kings, and really reminding, at least in the African American and Native American space, that we come from warriors and kings. We come from a strong people because we do have this shared trauma like slavery and genocide and removal and being dehumanized, but we also have these strong connections to our ancestors who were amazingly brilliant and healers and all of these things. And I think that's the narrative that children are sometimes missing because it's not the national narrative. It isn't what they want us to know about each other because it gives us strength, right? It gives us resilience and it gives us power. And so, really wrapping around our young people in the beauty that exists in all that they are, and uplifting that, because that's what's going to have them carry their head high into school and into these difficult situations in these racist communities. And no one's going to be able to tell them different because they've learned from a very young age, this is who you think I am, and this is who I actually am. This is where I come from. No one can take that from me. And just really owning that, I think that's my perspective as a parent. Glenn?
I would say, one thing and my mom did a great job of, telling me a little about my dad. But, I think one thing that would have helped a little bit more, especially with my, confusion and, of really trying to gain identity of who I was, is, taking the time to, as best as she could, to talk to me a little bit and teach me a little bit about what it means to be black, and some of that black history, even to educate herself, because even then I think I could have done a better job with my older sons. My oldest son is 29, and I think I could have done a better job of it, explaining where he comes from, and by uh, renewing or making that connection with my dad, uh, and my dad's side of the family. We're getting that now a little bit more. We're having those discussions. I talk to my dad all the time, and he's kind of like the family historian. So he knows all the relations and the history of his side of the family. So when I talk to him, he's more than willing to share those things. And I think that would could have been better on my part as a young father, having helping my sons understand their black side. And I think like I said, my mom did the best she could, but I think I would have benefited from having a mom that would said, yes, you're Kiowa, yes, you're Native American, yes, you're Delaware and cattle and all that, but you're black too, and I want you to learn this. I want you to learn this little about yourself. I think that would have been better. So I think even as parents, uh, if you're a parent like my mom was, and maybe the dad's not there or there to teach them, that part of them. take the opportunity to educate yourself a little bit about Black history and, teach them. One thing that was real eye-opening to me, and I don't know if anybody's has had opportunity, but I was in DC a few years ago and I got to go to the African American History Museum, and that was an eye-opening experience for me, just to see that experience of African American people from the time of the slave trade on through the civil rights movement until today, and it really helped me be more connected and appreciate that side of me. And that was then, I'm 48. That was just a few years ago. So, I think if you could do that as a parent, really, it'll help. It'll help your children to see that and appreciate that part of them.
Thank you, Glenn. So, I want to make sure I leave enough time for our survey at the end, but I want to say thank you to everyone who has joined, to all of the participants. It has really fed my spirit to be in community with all of you, and I think as we do this work, while we're focusing on what the experiences of biracial youth as we work to do better in our communities, if we expose all of our children, whether or not they're biracial, to these teachings and information, they become better citizens of our tribal nation and of the world. They become allies. They have an understanding of other folks. And I think that makes us stronger communities generally. So I think these are things that not only should we should be doing with our biracial relatives, but all of our children. And our children should know about Black history, our children, and not just on this month, right? They should know about these intersection and tribal history and Black history, and how we came to be and who we are, and where we want to go. So thank you so much for joining. Antonio, if you want to go to the next slide. We already did questions in the chat. And so Antonio will do the link for the survey. We would appreciate it if you could fill it out. It helps us to learn and improve, see, how we can do better and program in the future. So if you'll take a moment to do that, we'd greatly appreciate it. Happy Black History Month to everyone, and thank you again.